My buddy Lee Atkins reached out to me the other day to tell me that people were taking my advice. For those that don't know who Lee is, he is the administrator for the Discord server associated with the channel. But he told me that people were taking my advice of going out and buying comics right now because prices are favorable. And one of the things that he said to me is that people have questions as to where and how to go about buying comics right now. And so he encouraged me to create a video to provide a little bit of insight. The challenge, of course, is that there are an infinite number of places and ways to actually buy comics, but I wanted to create the video to be able to give a little bit of guidance to folks out there. And what I would encourage you to do is that if you have additional thoughts, if you have additional references and sources, to leave those suggestions down in the comment section or head over to the Discord server and post up your recommendations there. There is a link down in the description. With that said, let's get to the video. Reggie here, and I want to welcome you to another one of my videos. As I mentioned in the intro, there are an infinite number of possibilities when it comes to buying comics. There are an infinite number of ways to actually buy comics. And so it's going to be impossible for me to create any type of comprehensive video, but I wanted to take shot on goal by at least capturing a couple of recommendations and thoughts for you all to be able to consider. Because at the end of the day, I don't know what you're buying. I don't know how much money you want to spend. I don't know what part of the country you're in or what type of books you're looking for, right? But I wanted to give you a couple of thoughts to noodle. I will tell you that I do have my preferences, and I will maybe share some of those over the course of this video. But again, I wanted to cover off on a couple of things. It might not seem like these first three places are great sources of comics, but they are sources of comics, and in your area they may be better or worse. We'll have to see. Antique stores, pawn shops, and the Goodwill. Those are three places that I have actually found and bought comics. And so you may be driving by some of these places. It never hurts to stop in and see what they have. And I will tell you that it is, again, a little hit or miss. It is also a little hit or miss with the quality of what you're going to find, but they tend to have comics. So if you're driving down the street and you see a pawn shop or an antique store, it never hurts to swing by. You may also want to ask them whether there is something in the back of the shop. I've gone to some antique stores and they may have, a handful of books in the front of the store, but they sometimes have had a lot of books behind the counter or in the back storeroom. So you definitely want to ask some questions there. Another place that you can look for comics are, of course, a local comic shop. And I am a huge fan of local comic shops, especially if they're good shops. But you cannot go wrong with hitting up the local LCS. Now, the challenge, of course, is that your inventory may be a little limited depending upon what you're looking for. They may or may not specialize in that genre or book or that age of book, but you cannot go wrong with hitting up an LCS. And I will tell you, in my general area, I have hit just about every single LCS at least once. And even when I travel, I tend to hit up local comic shops if my schedule permits in the area that I'm traveling to. So again, you definitely want to hit up the LCSs. Another great source of comics are auctions. And I personally am not a fan of auctions, and I'll explain why in just a moment. But platforms like eBay, Heritage, Comic Link, Comic Connect, and even Shortbox now, these are all places where you can actually tap into some auctions. And I do believe that they will have a period in which they preview what's coming up in the auction. And so it's a great opportunity for you to see, what's on the horizon, what might be coming up for auction in the near future. And so that's a great way to actually find books. Part of the reason why I don't like auctions is because I oftentimes get caught up in the excitement of bidding and I'm not thinking as clearly and I want to win and I end up paying more for a book than I otherwise would. So that is part of the reason why I personally do not do auctions. But your approach may be very different than mine. Lee Atkins, for his part, actually does use auctions, and I believe that he actually puts a bid in, his highest bid, and then he walks away from the auction, right? So he doesn't get swept up in it because he places his bid and he walks away. So in addition to getting caught up, the other thing that I do not like about auctions are the fees. There are some fees that are always tacked on to the winning bid, and so you have to factor those additional costs into the cost of that comic because you have to pay it. And some auctions are better than others with that. Like eBay, I think you pay a little bit more because the seller pays those fees. But like a Heritage, Comic Link, I think they add those fees on top of the winning bid. So you definitely want to be aware of that. There are also a ton of web stores out there that sell comics. I technically have comics on my website, regiecollects.com, but another site that comes to mind is Hip Comic. They used to be a sponsor of the channel, but this is a great platform for being able to find and buy comics. They actually use the platform to basically sell comics for local comic shops around the country. So that's a great option. Another great resource is mycomicshop.com, and I love this platform. I will tell you, they sell new books at a discount, so you can't go wrong there. But then they also have a store where you can search for books and buy books directly, I do believe, from their inventory. They have an auction feature as well, but as I mentioned, I don't do auctions. I prefer to search their inventory and buy directly from them. I will also mention that mycomicshop.com sells on eBay. So if you're searching for a book on eBay and you see that it comes from My Comic Shop, I would encourage you to go directly to mycomicshop.com to complete your purchase, because you can get the book for less money, because again, they add those fees in. So when you buy it there, you pay that, and that's how they offset the fees. Dealers are also a fantastic way to go. And I will tell you for a fact that I have done a lot of business with dealers over the years. One in particular that I really like is Reese's Rare Comics. I have bought a lot of raw and graded comics from them, expensive comics, not so expensive comics. I love seeing these guys at cons, but I also like doing business with them as well, so you should check them out. Another dealer that comes to mind are the Bunky Brothers. Awesome guys out of California, great inventory. You should definitely check them out without a doubt. Blue Chip Comic is another dealer that readily comes to mind. Nico and I have done some business together, so I definitely recommend those three dealers. So if you guys get a chance, be certain to check them out. I should also highlight that cons are a great way to actually snag comics. And if I can make a couple of recommendations, I would suggest you potentially go on the last day of the con. Not the first day, because dealers might not be willing to negotiate on day one, but maybe by day 3, after they've covered their expenses, maybe made a little profit, they might be more willing to actually wheel and deal. You may also want to go at the end of the day if it happens to be a one-day con. Maybe they'll be more apt to make a deal. But one of the things that I recommend that you do, well, there's a couple of things. You may want to walk the showroom floor and basically do an inventory of the book that you are trying to buy. Take photos, take notes, take note of the price for that book so you know what's at the con. If you're looking for a specific book, you know what's at the con, you know the grade, you know the prices. You can then take some time to do some research to figure out what are these comics worth? What is the fair market value? What might you want to spend? So if you decide to move forward, you go back to that specific dealer, and now you are negotiating from a position of knowledge, right? You've done your research, you know what they are asking for, you know potentially what the book is worth, maybe you've given thought to what you're willing to pay. Now you can start to have a real conversation. Another thing, you may want to have cash. Again, I don't know what you're buying, but if you have cash, that also puts you in an advantageous position versus if you're using a card of some sort and the seller has to pay some fees. That's a great way to negotiate an extra couple of % off if you go that route. So definitely consider that. during the pandemic, the live claim sales were incredibly popular. And so these live claim sales take place on both Instagram and Facebook. Sometimes they are organized by comic shops, by dealers, sometimes by comic book content creators. I actually bought my Amazing Fantasy 15 from one such content creator on Instagram. That's how I bought my book. So again, I kind of put my money where my mouth is when I talk about some of this stuff, but that's a great way to go. Same thing with live sales, things like a Whatnot. Great platform for being able to find books. What I will tell you is that with all of the recommendations that I've kind of outlined, there are pluses and minuses to all of these things. And so you're going to have to give some thought to what you're looking for, how much money you want to spend, what chances you want to take, right? Whether you want to get your hands on the book or whether you're comfortable spending money without ever having held that particular book in your hand. But there are pluses and minuses to all of these things without a doubt. Now, with that said, what I will say is that I generally, over the last few years, do not buy from eBay. And that is not because I don't like eBay. It's simply because I think that there are better places to buy comics than eBay. And I tend to buy a lot of my books right now through a local comic shop, Nirvana. Technically, they're not local to me, but they are a local comic shop. Nirvana Comics, I buy a lot of my new books from them. I buy books also through dealers. As I mentioned before, I like working with dealers. I really do, and I like to develop a relationship with them. And I also feel like I'm giving my money to someone that I know versus a faceless entity like eBay. But in addition to those, I also buy books through Shortbox, and I have been a Shortbox user for a couple of years now. I've bought a lot of books through them. It's a great platform. They're from the community. So again, it's like keeping the money within the community gives me a good feeling. So I will say again that if you have recommendations, leave them down in the comment section or head over to the Discord server, have the conversation over there, share your resources. If you've had good experiences, bad experiences, share those things. If you've worked with some consignment places, some dealers, let people know where the deals are and where the opportunities are, where people are providing great service. All right. With that said, we're going to wrap this video up. I want to thank you guys for taking the time to watch. I hope that you enjoyed this video. And if you did, I want to encourage you to give the video a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do that. And if you want to reach out to me, you can do it on Instagram at Regie Collects. Take care.
This thing on? Mic check. I just want to make sure y'all can hear me clearly. Yeah. Should you practice art? Or should art be your practice? I had a question, so I asked it. Not to anyone specifically, but to my inner God, you know? The one that's gonna be a master. The one that's more than a rapper. The one that's an educator. The one that seeks enlightenment. He travels with concepts. He's got the mindset expansive. He understands that his time combined with travel and concepts makes his mind convex. Sort of like when you look at a brain scan. Straight off meditation, we was concaving until we had that eternal dialogue that created our dialect. Now we in distinct rooms of pure souls having them conversations. Synergy and combination.